Just seeing numbers slowly come up here, George, so we'll just wait a little bit for everyone to come in.
That's great, Chris. Realized I could have set up some music while we waited. It was
yeah, I didn't think about that. That would have been good. Just welcoming everyone in, and we'll get started soon. We're just waiting for all the people that registered to join us. Okay. Great. Well, I think numbers are starting to slow down a little bit, but there will obviously be some other people joining us a little bit late. But good morning and welcome to today's Business Support Series webinar. I want to thank everybody for joining us. My name is Chris Mann. I'm the Corporate Partnership Specialist here at the Chamber and your host this morning. I work with our members to find solutions that work for both of us, and they can take a little bit of negotiation. I'm looking forward to hearing from our guests today on how to make the most of negotiation. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions for our presenter. When we get to the Q&A period, feel free to type any questions in the chat box below or in the Q&A box right beside that. Our presenter today is George Lebec, President of Lebec Negotiation. George is an entrepreneur, professional speaker, and proud supporter of small businesses. Trained in advanced negotiations and business strategy trained in advanced negotiations and business strategy at both the MIT School of Entrepreneurship and Harvard School of Business. He's a former board member of Entrepreneurs Organization EO and has traveled to over 100 countries. Welcome, George. Thanks so much for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here. Although I'm based in Montreal, I'd just like to start by saying that I'm originally from New Brunswick, so I'm a maritimer at heart. So you don't think you just have a crazy Quebecer on your hands. And I got to apologize in advance for some of the members. You may hear some barking in the back. We have a new puppy basset hound, and he's cute as a button with the long ears and the droopy eyes, but he gets pretty active in the morning. So I have had plenty of meetings interrupted by him barking and squealing, but he's a cutie. If I have a chance, maybe I'll show him off a little later.
Okay.
So
perfect.
Proud to be here. Thanks for the intro, Chris. Really appreciate it. When we drop names like MIT and Harvard, it looks really elitist, but I got to reassure everybody that I didn't get in there on my own. After I sold my import distribution company, which imported leather goods, wallets, handbags, and distributed them all over Canada. We actually had quite a few great customers in Halifax, Kelly's Luggage, Tannery by DJs in the day. Had a chance to sell it in 2004. In 2005, got a job with a company called EF Education First, which is a very large education organization that has 50,000 people in over 100 countries. Some of you may know us from EF Educational Tours, where we take students traveling with their teachers around the world. Well, and I still work there. I still do work there, and my negotiation training seminars are done as an add-on. But at EF, they sent me, because I was just an unpolished entrepreneur, so they sent me to MIT and Harvard to do a joint MBA, and I discovered negotiation training and fell in love with it, and that's become my focus. So I help people learn the basics of negotiation. I have clients negotiate through deals. I certainly work on many issues at EF that require some negotiation assistance. And I've applied a lot of this, and I'm going to try to resume it in the next 35-40 minutes. As we know, it's a very complicated and detailed skill to learn. And I spend still about a year in Boston tuning up, and I've been doing that for over 12-13 years. And I spend many hours a week continuing to read and look up case studies. So when you leave today, I don't expect you to be a seasoned and expert negotiator, but you will get the basics and you'll understand some of the concepts and you can apply them immediately. So that's the goal. So why is it that we negotiate? Well, it's because almost every single human interaction is a negotiation. And if you think about it, even in our personal lives, we are negotiating continuously throughout the day. But in our business lives, the impact is even more deep. I mean, I have plenty of friends who run very extensive businesses, and when I spend days with them, I notice even on the fly how many times they're negotiating for various issues with customers, with suppliers, with staff, and it's always amazed me how little people pay attention to those little things, because they make an enormous impact through long periods of time as you're working through your business. And part of the reason I think people struggle with negotiation is that it's not a natural skill, but they think it is. They think you're either a born negotiator, and there's no such thing. It's a learned skill. And great negotiators aren't born that way, they're trained. And so that's the first lesson. Negotiation is something you learn. It's not something that comes naturally. So very few entrepreneurs, professionals are formally trained in negotiations. Only less than 1 in 6 have even read a book or a manual on negotiating. The vast majority leave money and terms on the table. This is from assessing thousands of deals through the Kellogg School of Business, Stanford. Really, people have left a lot of gain because they didn't know how to proceed through a proper negotiation. And they're worse than they think, mostly because of what I was talking about, that culture of well, I call it culture of influence. So what I mean by that is a lot of people have started their businesses and they've gained the title of president, CEO, and they've grown those businesses. And because they're there, they presume that they have the capacity to negotiate. Yet they are not even familiar with the framework that I'm going to teach you today. And I think they just go on the fly. And there's also that vision of natural competency, right? Just believing that you're better than you are, and you should be negotiating certain things because you were born that way. Again, there's no such thing as a born negotiator. It's a learned trait. The culture of influence also has quite a large effect. And just really quickly, I got brought in a couple of years ago to help out with the issue that was occurring in Ontario through a very acrimonious strike with the colleges and the province. And they were going nowhere. This were the community college that were mainly rural Ontario, and it was affecting tens of thousands of students. Actually, I think 300,000 or 400,000, and thousands of staff, and it was getting nasty. And when I hopped in right at the end before, unfortunately, the government had to legally mandate everybody to go back, which is never what we want. But when I sat with the person responsible for negotiation for the colleges, and we started to kind of dig through a little bit about her competency, the only reason she was there is that because she had the vice president title, which she had gained by being there for 10 years. She had never even read a book on negotiating, and she was negotiating a very important deal with the province, and she was completely out of her depth and didn't have the competency to do that, in all respect to her. But because she had the title and that was her position, she felt like she needed to run point on it, and that was a mistake. I can tell you that I at EF work for billionaires, and there's many times that they don't get involved in certain negotiation. They leave it up to people that have been trained and know what they're doing. So I think that's one of the impact why people are worse than what they think. So people often ask me, hey, what's the definition of a negotiation? Well, it's quite simple. It's an exchange aimed at reaching an agreement. And what's the goal? And this is the part this is lesson number 2, the very important part. It's to reach your objective. It's not necessarily to get the best price or to get the best terms. It's about reaching your objective. Most people negotiate the wrong deal. So helped out a friend of mine who has a delivery business. His business right now is struggling with cash, even though he's quite profitable. It's just that it's grown quite rapidly. And he just started recently to negotiate for a new fleet or an add-on of trucks. And he was so obsessed with price that nothing was happening. He was going from dealer to dealer, broker to broker. And we realized that price wasn't even the main issue. It was what monthly cost was going to be. So the difference in the package of what he was going to pay was inconsequential insofar as he just needed the lowest possible monthly payment. So we restructured the package so that he'd have much longer to pay for it on a very respectable interest rate. But the point was that we reduced his outlay per month by about 35%, even though those vehicles are going to end up costing him more in the long run. Because at the moment, cash was his main thing. So the objective changed to getting the best cash deal on a monthly basis. Very important. So you reach your objective. And I'm going to give you a relatively quick example why we negotiate. So this is Matt Harrington. Back in 2000, he was a phenom pitcher. They hadn't seen a player like him in decades. He pitched 4 no-hitters at his high school. He had the lowest earn run average of any amateur pitcher in the United States, and he was deemed by Sports Illustrated as a no miss. And so even though he had that higher ranking, some of the teams started getting a little cold in regards to him, because his agent, even before the amateur draft happened in 2000, was already sending out signals that he was going to request the largest contract in history for a rookie being drafted in the major leagues. So instead of going first, which he should have gone, I'm going to show you what happened in the next 5 years. He was drafted 7th. The Colorado Rockies offered him $4 million guaranteed for 2 years. They wanted $5 million, just under $5 million. They wouldn't budge, so they couldn't get to a deal. So he went into the independent league, pitched there, didn't do so well, was drafted again in 2001. Another team took a chance on him. This time he was offered 1.2 million. His agent and he wanted 2 million. They couldn't get into an agreement, so he went back into the draft, was drafted 374th. They offered him $400,000 just to kind of stay on the team and try out and do all that. He wanted $1 million. Went in 2003 back in the draft, was picked 711th. They just offered him a tryout. He wanted $250,000. And in 2004, he was drafted 1,037th. I'm pretty sure, Chris, that I could have been drafted 1,037th if I had been playing baseball in those days. He was offered a chance to go to camp. They wanted a bit of cash. They could never get a deal done. What does he do now? Works at Costco in California, making $11.50 an hour. Now, there's nothing wrong with working at Costco for $11.50 an hour. I'm a farm kid. That's not the point. Excuse me. The point is that Matt Harrington had a golden opportunity, not just to secure his financial future, but to also do what he wanted to do. But they didn't get done for a couple of reasons. Why? Partly because they didn't negotiate to their objective. If you had asked Matt Harrington at 16, 17, while he was in high school, what he wanted to do with his life, it would have been very simple: to play in the major leagues. That was his objective. Would it have been to earn $5 million instead of $4 million? No, that wouldn't have come up. The objective was to play in the major leagues. And then when given the opportunity to do that, and forgetting the value, he passed on it. He negotiated the wrong deal. He tried to negotiate more money instead of an agreement to play in the majors. Now, some of my friends have said, well, he didn't end up being a great pitcher in the independent league, so Colorado probably saved the money. I would argue that if he got drafted by Colorado, with all the support that he gets, the professional trainers, the dietitians, the experts, the videos, everything, that he might have become an incredible pitcher. Maybe 20 years in the majors, he might have made $150 million in his career. But again, it's not about the money in this, the lesson here. It's about not negotiating to their objective. And then I looked it up. I looked up his family. I looked up him. Although I didn't expect him to be trained negotiation, but then I looked up his agents. He went through 3 agents in 5 years. Not a single one of them were trained in negotiation. Not a single one, which was entirely baffling. It's entirely incredible to me that people would become sports agents, in essence, negotiate for a living and not get trained on it. So that is a lesson in itself of the risk of not doing the work and understanding how this works. So just review a little bit why people are poor at negotiating. They assume that it's a natural talent, so they don't do any work regarding it. They're obsessed only with their own interest. They're not looking at the other side. They're not looking at the big picture. They believe that negotiating is about being tough and posturing. Like we've seen that in politics in the last couple of years. It's about being tough and drawing the line. It is not that at all, I assure you. I spent my life around top negotiators, and none of them are like that. None. All the top in the world: Victoria Medvec at Kellogg, Diane Long at Harvard, Manny Malhotra at Harvard. All of these people are gentle, flexible, understanding, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. They don't prepare, and I'm going to show you how to prepare for negotiation in a couple of minutes, and they don't practice or gain experience. And in essence, I come back to this training, not just because I do that, whether with me or anybody else. I encourage everybody just to go out and pick up a book on it, and just to dig down and learn a little bit more, because it is a skill that needs to be developed, learned, and you gain it also through experience. So there's really 2 types of negotiations. There's a distributive negotiation, which is really one time, versus an integrative negotiation, which is really an ongoing relationship. So the way you can look at it is there's a pie, and in a one-time interaction, distributive one, I'm trying to get the biggest piece of that pie. So when I, as an individual, when I negotiate for a house or car, things that I don't need to have an ongoing relationship with the other side, I am ruthless. I'm absolutely over the top ruthless. I buy houses completely different than everybody else buys houses. Not in this market. This market is a misnomer. It's just all the rules are out of the game here. But on a normal market, what I do instead of negotiating the price up front, I agree with the price up front. I just give them what they ask for. And then I ask for a 3-week delay on inspections. And then I ask for 2 very detailed inspections. And then I come back to the people 3 weeks later and I have a whole list of demands, even like slightly crooked light switches and cables that are not properly put in for the heater that are easy fixes, little crack in the window, all of that. I request that it gets fixed, or I put a dollar amount to it for a reduction. And in most cases, in the last 10 years, real estate that I've bought, I usually get all the concession with a big discount. Something like, and don't quote me on this, but something like 98% of all the houses are sold within 97% of asking price. That's not true in this market today. Again, the rules are out. I usually can get between 15 to 20% down from the price of the house. Probably closer to 15% actually, as I think about it, 12 to 15% just by using this method. So again, because I don't need to have an ongoing relationship with the other side. Now, on an integrative negotiation, you do. So when you're buying companies and you roll people in, when you're negotiating salaries, when you're negotiating with suppliers and customers, those are ongoing relationships. So you need to have a different approach to the negotiation. I'm not going to make too much difference between the two today. That takes a lot of time, but just to keep that in mind. So one time you're trying to get the biggest piece of the pie, and an ongoing relationship and an integrative one, you're trying to expand the pie, come up with some thoughts that are better for both sides so that your pie, your piece rather gets bigger, and so does theirs, because you're working together to expand options. So the negotiation styles, the framework that we use is that we look at people that we're working with, and even this, I had to do this work for myself, where we put them in a category. So I'm going to try to use this little laser pointer and never do this, but hopefully it's going to work. Hopefully it works here. Chris, do we see that? Does it work? Hopefully it does.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, great. Thank you. So if you look at personal trait, the bottom line is cooperativeness. So this is low cooperativeness, and this is high cooperativeness, and this is low assertiveness and high assertiveness. And I think when I was younger, when I did this exercise, I saw myself as really quite high assertive, but low cooperativeness, excuse me, which means that I really want to just morph myself. I was an aggressive negotiator. I didn't yield much. I was just completely always like, no, I want more, I want more, I want more. So I was assertive, but I didn't cooperate very well with people, which means I lost out on a lot of opportunities and lost out on a lot of gains, even though I thought I was winning. What we see from data is that as a personal trait for great negotiators, we want them somewhere around here. So we want them quite cooperative. We want them pretty high. We have to be able to work and adjust and adapt to things, but we also need them to be assertive, because if they're low assertive, they can't make a decision, they delay stuff. And I think you probably see that all day long with some potential customers that you're working with or suppliers. We're pitching things, we're trying to work through issues, and they just can't make a decision. They're avoiding. So the goal for them is to always to delay and push off. But if they're cooperative, then they can work with you, but then they also need to be high assertiveness so they can make that decision, is my point. So what I ask from everybody is that they start looking at where they are as a personality trait in exchanges when they work through negotiations. And if you're low on cooperativeness and you're high in assertiveness, I'm going to try to move you over and to open you up. And if you're not assertive enough, we're going to try to get you to kind of improve that and focus on making decisions and being confident in the way you're doing it. So I'm going to get rid of this little pointer now. I'm glad it worked. So there's really 2 key points to greatness in learning to negotiate. One is to prepare. The other is to set aggressive goals. And I'll dig down on that a little bit. So how you prepare for negotiation is that you really do the work on what you want to achieve. What's the objective? What are you working towards? And then the other is you're assessing the other side. Where are they sitting? What are they doing? Why are they interacting with me? And that can be done in customer, supplier, employees, they're there for a reason. What's their situation? And then also assessing the situation. I talked about house buying at the moment. The market is completely bonkers. I know almost exclusively around the country, Montreal particularly. I know it's the same thing in Halifax. Because the situation is so like that, we have to change the strategy. I would not buy a house like I described to you a few minutes ago, because the situation is different. Not that I wouldn't buy one, but I wouldn't buy it in the manner I did now. So I would have to change my strategy. So the situation does matter. So let me teach you some of the key terms in negotiation. These are pretty fun. The target point is what you really want. And I'm going to show you how to put this in a framework. But the target point, just remember, is what you're really trying to get to, what your ultimate goal, your aspiration is. BATNA are your alternatives to reaching that agreement. The next slide will explain that a little bit more. And your reservation point is the line you don't cross, is the most or least you're willing to go. So you should never confuse your target with your reservation. So not so long ago, I helped my niece buy a car, and then we walked up somewhere, and the fellow hadn't posted the price yet. It just said for sale, come and check it out. And as I walked up, I didn't have a chance to speak first, and I'll tell you why that's a good idea in a second. And he said, okay, I'm asking $6,000 for the car, but I'll take $5,000. I hope to get 6, but I'll accept 5. Well, we ended up buying it for $4,500, because the moment he said, I'll take 5, he revealed his reservation point to me. And that was a mistake. Those are two different things. And again, I'll show you what this looks like in a minute, but just keep that in mind. Reservation point is the line you don't want to cross. So your BATNA stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What happens if I don't do this deal right now? What's my alternative? What's my fallback? So if you're going to buy a car and it's Friday and you don't have a car for work for Monday, so you have to walk out with a car, your alternatives are going to be different than if you have months to think about it or work it through or negotiate. That's actually how I buy cars. I start months in advance, and I push the dealers to tell me when they're about to reach quota. And then I make them a crazy offer, because I know that by them selling that car at the end of the month, they reach quota and get a discount on all the previous cars sold. So time provides me with an alternative. I already have a car. I only buy houses when I'm already in a house. I haven't sold it yet. I don't need a condition, because the alternative is I've got a place to live. Your alternatives are very important. So BATNA, you will hear a lot as you enter more and more negotiation circles. You'll hear, what's your BATNA? We hear it in the house all the time here. Oh, Dad, can I get something? Well, what's your BATNA? And then we you know what that means. It's just, what's your best alternative? It's really your greatest source of power in any negotiation, and you're always trying to improve your alternatives. You're trying to assess them, you're evaluating them, and you're trying to push really, really hard to improve them, so you can adjust your reservation point. If they're better, you can move the line up from the line in the sand that you've created for not to cross. Reservation point is really you need to have discipline to never cross that line. When I set it, I don't cross it by a penny. And again, I'll give you an example in a second what my son did. And I think that that's really good discipline. And the reason that's good discipline is that at least you're in a box. You know what you're trying to get to, what the most you're going to pay, because you're going to set a cap on that. But then you're also going to put some parameters around how you're going to structure that. But then the line not to cross allows you to stay and focus a little bit more in the box, as opposed to being open. And that's part of the preparation. It also allows you to realize that, hey, if you're so far off your reservation point that a deal can't be had, you can just walk away. And I think that's also important. So I was looking for a new bicycle for my son a few weeks ago. I heard a friend say, yeah, I've got a bike to sell. I didn't want to spend more than $100, $150, but he was selling it for $500. My reservation point was actually $150. So I didn't start negotiate. I just said, nope, it's way too much bicycle for what he needs. It was just a second one, so he can cruise around to football practice. But thanks anyway. It wasn't worth it. It was too far off. And as I'm with the example I gave before, never, ever, ever, ever reveal your reservation point ever. That was ridiculous of the other person to do so, but it's a habit that I think sometimes people make as they're negotiating through issues. So let's talk a little bit about making some offers. So I'd like to take a poll. Maybe Chris, you can help me out with this, with the responses. I'd like to ask our participants and give them a few seconds to answer. Is it better to make the first offer and wait for the other person to offer back, so go first, or is it better to go second, to wait until the other person makes an offer, the other side makes an offer, and then respond? So is it better to go one first or two respond, wait for the initial and then respond? So we'll just take a couple of seconds to get some answers.
Yep, perfect. So if you guys want to enter your answer there in the chat to help George out there, that'd be great.
How are we looking? Mostly ones, mostly twos? Bit of mix?
I got 1-1 so far.
Okay.
I got a 2.
So it's about evenly split.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I won't drag this out any further. We're a little tight on time, but generally speaking, we get about 70%, 75% of people saying that they should wait, go second, and about 25% of people go first. And I can tell you that those who offer first win. Offering first is a very powerful tool. I'll talk a little bit more about that next slide. This we know from assessing thousands of deals. And the reason for that is that most of the time, it's an effect called anchoring. People have a psychological lock at around where the anchor point is on that first offer. And a very high number of deals happen very close to the percentage of the initial anchor, because that's where the friction is. And if you think about it, you're actually anchored all day long. When you walk through a mall and there's a price on something, they've anchored you. When you go to buy virtually anything, frankly, they've already anchored you. Even in salary negotiation, they make job offers and they post already what that job is worth. The key is to try and offer first. That is, we know, and that's applicable about 90% of the time when you've done the work and you know what you're talking about. So anchoring is a very big part. We also, contrary to some beliefs, is we build trust, we share information. I think most of you would be shocked how much I'm transparent in the negotiation, explain why I'm here, what I'm representing, what I'm trying to get done. I think by building the rationale, we make a human connection. They understand, it builds the rationale and reasonability, and it's very, very helpful. So I would share more. Now, what I don't share are the terms, the reservation point, structure, some side issues that we may have. You know, it may be necessary for us to do this deal because we require some funding, and it will only happen if we increase our sales, and this deal is important. I won't do that, but I'll explain the strategic view on why we're trying to get to where we got to get to. And when it comes to making an offer, and we talk about setting aggressive goals, is go further than what's comfortable. Go a little further. Just don't overdo it. I'll explain that in a second, but just take it a little bit notch above. I think most people are a little apprehensive to do that, but in making offers, it's always better to push the envelope. And then, like we talked about with the BATNA, you understand your options and your positions. And then this is something my wife, I think a lot of times struggles with when we go into negotiations and help her out, not just with her business, but in her personal lives, is she often says to me, oh, well, the other side will never go for that. I mean, they would never go for that. I wouldn't do that. Well, never presume that. We have no idea really what is happening, why they're at the table. We've done as much work as we can, but you would be surprised how often people react in a way that is unplanned or unassumed. So I think it's very important to shake that out and just build your framework, and not worry about what the other side is going to say or respond. Just work it through and make sure that you go a little further than it's uncomfortable, but that you go in with confidence. When you make offers, you go in, you explain it, you push it, and then you deliver it in a way that shows that you're in control. So the framework, which is a very important part of building a good negotiation plan, is relatively straightforward. So when you bring your framework, you start with your objective. You identify really what you're trying to do, what type of negotiation it is, and what are your alternatives? What's your BATNA? And usually you would list 3 of them. And as you're listing those 3, you would work very hard at trying to improve them, figuring out ways to make those a little stronger. Then you would put a target point, you would put a reservation point, and then you would make your offer. Okay, so let me show you how that works practically. with a sheet my son and I worked on 3 years ago or so, 4 years ago, when he wanted to buy a video game. So this is exactly what it looks like. We use this type of stuff all day long. So he is a huge hockey fan. His favorite team is, of course, the Pittsburgh Penguins, much to my chagrin, although I like the Penguins, but I'm a Habs fan. And of course, he's a Penguins fan because he adores Sidney Crosby, of course. And so he loves to play NHL hockey games on his console, and NHL 17 had just come out, and he really wanted it, and he needed to buy it at the lowest price possible. So it was pretty simple. It was a distributive negotiation because it was a one-time one. He was going to try to get the biggest piece of the pie. So he wasn't buying with his friends or sharing with his friends. It was going to be him. So here he sat down and we looked at his alternatives, and he could buy it new for about $93 plus tax. He could get a used disc, but it didn't have the special code, so he could change the jerseys on the fly and build his own player, and he really wanted that. But he could get that for $50. He had somebody who was willing to trade him his second favorite game, which was NBA 16, and $20 for it. So he knew that he had that, or he could wait a few months and buy it what is normally the discounted price at that time, which is about 30%, give or take. So 30-40%. So he knew those were his alternatives, and he looked around and he found a young man, 19-year-old young man, who was selling it with the case and all the codes for $75. So his target was to pay $60 for it, but he wasn't going to pay any more than 70. So this is the distinction I was making earlier between your target point, where you're trying to get to, and your reservation point. So your goal, your aspiration is 60, but you won't go more than 70. That's your reservation point. And I made it clear to him that if it was $70.25, he was not to take the deal. $70 was the highest he was going to go. And then he built up offers. Now, I talked earlier about offers. I'd like, if you can, to always make offers 3 simultaneously, even if it's simple. And let me show you why, or at least you'll see why as I explain it. So if his first offer was to offer $50 cash, $50 straight up. Now, the $50 was an important amount. We had to talk about it because it wasn't his target. It wasn't 60. It was below that because he leaves room for concessions, leaves room to maneuver. That seems like an obvious negotiation, but a lot of people mistake that. And it also wasn't too low. It was aggressive. You know, at first he said, well, I'm going to try for 60, Dad. And I thought, oh, let's get a little bit more aggressive. Let's let your target, let's make your target 60, but let's offer a little lower than that. And he goes, well, what if he doesn't take it? I said, just 50 is not super insulting as long as you can explain it. So, it just, yeah, sure, it's aggressive, but it's not over the top. And then he came up with a couple of other offers, which was 40 cash in any of the 6 video games that he had listed. He had 10 that he was willing to let go, and then 6 video games in total that he could trade, used ones, because he thought maybe the other side, the 19-year-old young man, would be a gamer and interested in some of those games. And then he built up the rationale. He said, listen, I'm 12 years old, right? This kid's 19, I'm 12. Hopefully that'll make a bit of an impact. I have to work for my money. My parents don't give me anything. They don't give me an allowance every week. I'm a huge hockey fan. I just love playing these games. It's the best ever. And my parents won't pay. And I really don't have much money because I got to earn everything I do, every penny I do. And he delivered that verbally to the fellow when he called him. So he had already rehearsed it. He knew what he wanted to say. None of them were lies. And he just delivered that. And then he gave the young man the 3 options. Now, the young man came back and said, okay, listen, I get it, but I'm going to need probably $60. Now, Luke knew that 60 was his target, and he could have immediately said yes. But what we taught him is not to jump on what we call the winner's curse, and to say that right away, and to say, and to kind of do one more step, like negotiate one more point. And he said, okay, listen, I understand you're looking at 60, but I've got 50, but I'm sure that if I look around the house, I can probably find $5 in coins in the couch and Dad's drawer. So, how about we do it now for 55? And the young man accepted. So he got the game for 55. So he used the framework. It was exactly how this thing was supposed to be. He knew what the maximum was going to be. He knew his target. He didn't let it go right away, like, right? He pushed it one more time. The other side could have said, yeah, no, I can't do that. And he said, okay, I'll figure it out. I'll pay you 60. And he would have reached his target. But now he got it at a better deal, more structured. He knew where he was going. So that's what a framework looks like. So really fun. So a few key terms and tricks as I start wrapping this up. Anchoring, we talked about. That's anchor first, make the first offer, put it out in the world, put your peg in the sand. That's called anchoring. Shelving is a little trick sometimes I use only in a distributive negotiation. So often when I negotiate for a car, for example, I use a shelving method where I say, listen, I'm going to negotiate for this car and I do this up front, but you need to come and pick up the car once a month at my office, detail it completely, and return it to me at the end of the day. And usually the salesperson goes, well, we can't do that. That's two people driving out. Your office is 45 minutes away or whatever. And then they got to come back. And then there's a cost to that. And I'm like, that's really important. All the cars I mostly buy, I do this. And they go, wow, I don't think we could do that. And I say, well, why don't we just put that on the shelf and we'll come back to it later. Okay, let's just keep talking about the car. And then as we're talking about the car, we get to a point, I don't know, where winter tires. And he says, yeah, I can't include the winter tires. And I go, well, tell you what, throw in the winter tires. I'm going to forget about the detailing. That's called shelving. Just put one or two items up there that you're willing to give up that have very little value to you. I wouldn't use it all the time. I wouldn't use it in an ongoing relationship, but on a distributive one, on occasion, it's very useful. The chilling effect just refers to making an aggressive on offer, but not too aggressive. And people will say, well, tell me, George, what's too aggressive? And I'll say, well, you'll know it. It's like that Supreme Court justice in the US once said about pornography. I can't describe it to you, but I know it when I see it. And I think it's the same thing with the chilling effect. I think with my son's example, 50 felt like the right number. He could justify a little bit. He's 12 years old, he's pushing it. But I think if he'd had asked for 40 or 35, that would have been too aggressive, too chilling. He might have turned off the other side. Lots of deals fall apart because people are too aggressive with the initial offer. We just got to be conscious of that. The winner's curse is that the person comes back, hits your target point, and you immediately go, yeah, we're good to go. Like my son could have just said 60, great, yeah, I'll take it. But he took it one more step. So we encourage people to just push a little further after they hit the target. Bulwerism is just this term where it's my first and final offer. I have an uncle who loves to do that, pretends to walk into car dealerships and just say, here's X and take it or leave it. And that's bush league stuff. Real negotiators don't do that. Deals don't work that way. It's absolutely ridiculous. That just happens in the TV shows or the movies. So don't do that, please. Don't anchor with your reservation point. If Luke would have been if his price would have been, let's say, if his reservation point story on the video game was 70, he didn't go in there saying, hey, I'll buy it, but 70 is my maximum. I can't pay it a little bit more. That is not a good habit to get into. A lot of people do that. And then build the scenarios like you did. Always be willing and open to talk and to negotiate and be flexible. And those are the great negotiators. Those are the ones that get great deals done. You're always open. And even people sometimes will sign agreements and deals with people, and then they come back and they want to change some things, and we're open to discussing that because maybe we can get some more things that matter more to us. That happens a lot. I invest in small businesses, and then sometimes the founders come back and say, well, I got to leave. I can't work for anybody. I don't want to have investors. And we say, okay, well, let's talk about what that might look like. And we end up typically exchanging an early release for additional shares or payout. And I think that openness allows us to do better on both sides, really. And also just plan your concessions. Don't give them out all at once. Have a few planned out. Just drop them as you go through the negotiation. And then range setting. All that means is saying, well, okay, for this item, I'd like to get between $50 and $75. That's not effective because astute negotiators will move you straight to the bottom of that range, and really you'll end up giving up more. So don't set ranges. The only time that's not applicable is in salary negotiation. Then we find that range setting is very effective because most of the employers move on the upper end of that range to be able to lock in the candidate. So range setting is very effective as opposed to setting a line in the sand. Otherwise, don't set ranges and don't fall for the even split. I love when sometimes I get people try to negotiate with me, and you know, I don't know, I'll say 200, they'll say 150 or reverse, and then they'll say, well, then let's do 175, even split in the middle. I take that as their latest offer, and I move up my range of where I'm going to be. So even split is a dangerous place with capable negotiators. And a quick do's and don'ts before we go to questions. Do compromise, be flexible, do not even split. Just talked about that. Do explain your offer. This is a review of what we've been talking about. Just do explain it, rationalize it. Do not claim win-win outcome at the beginning. And there's a reason for that. I've been caught before going into kind of extended labor negotiations, and I say to them, look, there's a real willingness, and this negotiation is going to be win-win for both sides. And as we start going through negotiation, a lot of that is subjective. So what we think is beneficial for our side may not be beneficial for the other side. And so in the middle of negotiation, I start getting accused of saying, hey, you told me this would be win-win, and it's not win-win. And then I say, well, it is win-win. Like, it's good for you. Don't tell us what's good. We don't see it that way. And then they use it against me as leverage. So I've learned to never, ever promise that at the beginning, to just say, we're going to move forward. We're going to do the best that we can. Our intentions are to get a deal done and work through the parameters. And then lastly, do make aggressive offers. Go a little further, just pin it further, anchor, and if you're already anchored, try to counter offer, just keep moving, but be aggressive. Go a little further than what's comfortable with. Okay. So, oh yes, sorry, last one. Don't act tough, don't posture, don't draw lines, don't believe that negotiation is the rough and tumble, squeezing people. That really is. I mean, we've been in this for now well over a decade. We've seen thousands and thousands of deals. I read a lot of case studies. Nothing good happens like this. The best deals are not made in that way. It's like I said, it's not the movies or TV shows. It's about being flexible, understanding, communicative, and having an ability to be open. So what you should do now, quickly before we get to questions, you should commit. If you're serious about this and want to improve this very important skill, you should really dive in, read as much as you can, take some classes, do what needs to be done. I would suggest that you sign up for the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School. You don't need to sign up for the program. You just go to their website, just PON, program on negotiation. You enter your email, and you're going to get daily emails with some case studies and tips and the Sunday Minute, and it's all free. Now, of course, they're going to keep pushing you to take a class at Harvard if you can, sure, or you can take it anywhere, Dalhousie, et cetera. But just getting that information is very, very useful for a lot of people. Watch videos online. You can Google negotiation classes, tips. Victoria Medvec's got some great stuff. Manny Malhotra is very, very busy on YouTube. Just dig on, just learn, pick up tidbits, practice, set parameters, get family, friends involved. So as I was saying earlier, our kids don't get an allowance. They have to negotiate for everything. So if somebody wants something, they come and see me and they say, Dad, I need $75 for a video game. So I'll tell you what, I'll clean up the garage and I'll pick up the dog poop in the backyard. And I'm like, yeah, not sure that's worth 75. But if you also mow the lawn and wash the car, maybe that's it. No, Dad, not washing the car. I think it's worth it. And then we end up kind of going back and forth. So in essence, right or wrong, everything is negotiable in my house, except dinner. We're not a restaurant. You eat what we serve, but everything else is negotiable. And I think that that's built up my kids to really see the world in a way that they use this skill and they develop certain capacities that should serve them well in the future. I see it personally, and I think everybody should see it as a growth opportunity. If you're improving negotiation skills, generally your life will do better in all aspects, your life, your career, everything. And you won't be able to calculate it. What I mean by that is you won't be able to say, hey, I took this course, this class, this training, and it hasn't really shown. Well, it's not like that. It's subtle. It's a little bit like your life is better because you had good parents or good siblings or a good mentor. It's that. You won't be able to pin on it, but I assure you that if you get better at negotiating, things will get better. And you let it become blink. And if you've ever read that book from Malcolm Gladwell, it's almost like you can see it instantly because you're so in it. I find myself now in the last few years walking into a boardroom and I completely understand what's happening and I can maneuver through very quickly because it's become natural. And to be that, you have to be in it for long periods of time and really to have fun. We talk around the house with BATNA and my colleagues, my wife, and what's your reservation point on that? And it's really become a source of enjoyment. Okay, so thank you very much for having me. Boom, exactly 15 minutes to go. So my timing was pretty dead on there, Chris. So happy to answer some questions now.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks so much, George. I mean, you had me laughing over here. My camera wasn't on, but some really great stories. I love the negotiation with the kids. I don't really need that. You could do this and this. Hilarious. Love it. The only thing I didn't like about the whole presentation is that you're a Habs fan. Sorry. I'm a Flames fan. We're chasing you. We want that. We want that playoff spot, right? So, anyways, I will remind everyone we are recording this and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. So don't worry if there was any slides that you wanted to go back to. We will have the recording, and I'll jump into questions here. So, first question, George. Isn't it better to know what the other side is at first? If you're the first one to make an offer, maybe you're offering more than the other one was willing to take. How would you know?
Well, you wouldn't know, and that's the devil in negotiating. But we've analyzed, and not me personally, but through groups that we work with, thousands and thousands of deals, and this we know for sure: those who offer first and anchor first win. And as in the exception I briefed over it quickly is the 10% when we're completely unprepared and we have no idea what we're doing. But otherwise, you can see it even in Pawn Stars, for example, when they don't know what they're buying, they say, well, what are you offering? And then when they do, they make an offer right away. You can see that most of the time. So, and I know the prevailing thought out there is, oh, you should wait for the other side because you may give up more. But I think if you're in control and you've drawn up what your objectives and your target is, then as you anchor, in the vast majority of the times, you're going to make bigger gains and they're going to be helpful to reach your own objective.
Great, perfect. Next question that we have here, George, in the example where you bought the car for $4,500, how do you really know 5,000 was his reservation point? Maybe it was 4,000 and his strategy got to him more. I do think that he gave the reservation point though. I think he said that.
But the question might relate to he might have faked it, and absolutely.
Oh, I get it.
Right? Yeah, fair enough. Well, we had also done our work and understood what the value on the blue book was in those cars. And depending on the mileage and the conditions of tires and things of that nature. And actually we were around 53 or 5,400 in terms of average value of the car. So because we had done that work, by the time we got to, and when he said it was 6,000, but I'll take 5,000, then it's just a judgment call at that time. And I said, well, budget as a student, we're going to try to work it. I made all the rationale. And so not only did we hit our target point, which was 5,000, right? We beat our target point, but we also felt very comfortable with the work that we were within the right sphere. You know what's interesting, just really quickly, Chris, there's actually the first exercise you do when you take this training at Harvard is exactly something like that, where people negotiate against each other. And when they leave, they're both happy, but yet they both left terms on the table. And I think that happens a lot, right? So if we walked away, the fellow might have said, oh, I would have sold it for 4,000, then we would have been frustrated. But actually walking away, we were very satisfied, and he appeared slightly less satisfied, but at least he was happy to have sold the car, which I think he needed to sell pretty quickly. My understanding is that he was moving. But that's a good point. We don't always know.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we're getting quite a few questions here, George, so I'll get through them as fast as I can here. So I'm a fan of American Pickers, and I find that they are an example of exactly what you were saying. Have you ever gone back or told someone they are asking too little for what they are asking for?
I have done that in educational purposes with people that I work with and to try and reframe. I haven't done it after a formal negotiation where we might have bought companies or we might have bought assets or something. So many over the years, but we've never gone back and said, hey, you were asking way too little. I don't think that's my job in that case, but if they're within the kind of sphere family people work with, yeah, of course we've done that. Yep. Okay,
great. Now flipping over to real estate, should you offer first in real estate?
Yeah, most of the time, real estate's a very complicated approach. And the reason for my hesitancy right now is the way the market is, the new reality is way off. But the general rule of thumb is yes, you should. but it rarely occurs because the market is set up just like most of the retail market and car market, where they already have anchored. They've already set a price. And so you have to work against that. In certain cases like repos or bankruptcies, you can offer first. Working through, like, certainly actually a good example is property next to ours in New Brunswick at our farm just north of Edmundston had been kind of held by the bank for 3 years. And we just called the bank and made a super crazy aggressive offer, and they said yes. So we just added, I think, 10 acres of land for, peanuts. And we anchored first. We didn't, they hadn't posted it just because we had understood the circumstances. But yeah, not sure I answered that question, but it's more complicated.
Okay, perfect. Next question here. Most of the examples were based from a buyer's perspective. If you are the seller, do you approach the process in the same manner?
Exactly the same manner. Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly the same manner. You can do the framework. You can decide what you want, how little you're going to take, what your reservation point is. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Next question. What tips do you have to instantly disarm people and set an approach tone for the negotiation ahead?
So openness, just getting to know each other a little bit, understanding and explaining some of the rationale while we were present, and having a bit of a connection. We're still humans, and humans negotiate with humans. I try to really set a tone through softer talking, not posturing, not giving credentials or experience, just explaining that I'm here to help work through a process so that we can reach an agreement. So really a disarming, flexible, multi-level approach, I think, works a lot better than saying, okay, let's sit down, let's get the job done.
Okay, great. George, one question and a few comments have come out that this was a great presentation. Just in regards, would you be willing to share the presentation as well?
Oh, yes, of course. Yep, happy to do that. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thanks. Oh, and then back to the real estate. Patty was saying she was referring to real estate when the seller is holding offers until a certain time.
Right. So yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think is the short answer in that. And the reason is you don't know what the other side is doing, but at least you should work within your own framework to understand how far you can go and where you want to be, that you're comfortable with the offer. And again, my only hesitancy in answering that question, Patty, is that it is an insane market at the moment, and all typical rules are out the window. I mean, it's I've never seen anything like it. So it's very difficult to maneuver typically how we would do it. But in general, yes, I would still work the framework and make the first offer. Yeah.
Great. Okay. What is the best strategy to negotiate commission for referrals with potential agents? And second to that, should the referral fee be as a flat fee or a percentage?
To mitigate risk, we like percentages, but it might not always work that way. So there are times when the ticket item is so large that the value of the referral as a percentage is not in line with what is adequate in terms of the value. So then we set a set fee. It just depends on growth rate. That's a really complicated question. The first part of that question was what, Chris? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. What is the best strategy to negotiate commission for referrals with potential agents?
Yeah, so long-term look, setting goals that go 12 to 18 months and aggregated percentages. So to lay them out early, very early on. I think the mistake, and I used to be in the import distribution business with about 75 agents out there. And I think the mistake I made often was just to say, hey, bring me some business, I'll take care of you. And I think what we want to do is just take a step back and negotiate slice by slice by slice based on growth and some aggregate levels on that. I'm pretty sure. Who asked that question, Chris? Do you have a name?
And funny enough, it was anonymous.
Oh, anonymous. Well,
yeah.
If you email Chris, or I'll give you my email at the end, email me, I'll send you a case study on that. I think there's one that we have in our data bank relating exactly to that.
Great. So I'll just remind everyone, we will follow up with a post-event email, and we'll include George's contact information in there as well.
Okay.
And then that way everyone will get it that registered for the webinar. Not the last question here, but I've lost some very important deals due to my weak negotiation skills. Do you recommend hiring a consultant/company for business negotiations? And do such companies exist?
They do. They do. Certainly they do. If you Google them, we accompany some people through deals as well. So yes, I think if it's time sensitive and it's very specific, then I would recommend bringing in a professional negotiator. It will be helpful. You will get better terms. There's no doubt about it. Again, it's a question of value to cost, obviously. But part of what I was saying today is to also, I think it's important if you're responsible, an entrepreneur running businesses, responsible for certain areas, that you learn to have the baseline of negotiation as well. And there's plenty of seminars out there, 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour, 8 hours a week, weekend. There's no shortage of them. And I would encourage you to jump in. I would also encourage everybody to pick up a copy of Getting to Yes, which is a book by Manny Malhotra and Bill, oh God, this last name just jumped out of my head. They're both from Harvard, Getting to Yes. And I would argue that it's the Bible of negotiating. Lots of great tips, lots of great structure. But if you are going through a transition in your business, you're buying or selling one, and you don't have a ton of experience in negotiation, I would look for people who have experience in doing that, and not necessarily lawyers or business brokers, because they don't often have a great negotiation technique. They're trying to get the transaction done, either at an hourly rate or so. So make sure you check their credentials and that they are properly trained and have tons of experience in this.
Great. Yeah, I know. And thanks for that referral. I wrote that down. I was going to ask you myself what books you would recommend for negotiation. So that's helpful. One other question here in the Q&A box: how do you handle negotiation if the other party or in brackets agent keep coming back to you and asking you to lower the price?
Yeah, then I typically work in a multifaceted thing. So I say, well, price is one angle of it. What are the other categories? Support, service, after, a relationship ongoing. How many times how much resources do we need to connect with you? And I'll try to draw as many issues relating to the relationship as we can, and then break down topics to negotiate on that front. So I think I know exactly what you're talking about. As a supplier to customer, you often get those customers keep coming back. I need another 3% off, another 5% off. The market's getting competitive. We worked with somebody in Montreal that had the same thing. And instead of just looking at price, we started to look at delivery time, support from our customer service, training. And as we started to add those things, we started to add value, but also just kind of take away the specific focus just on price. And then price became a secondary issue that allowed us to kind of keep margin integrity without having to give up, but providing other services. So it's a complicated question to answer just on the fly like this, but to try to overlay more issues than just price is the most effective way. We also, if you do a little bit of work on understanding too what their BATNA is, often customers will posture, but they may not have many other options in the market at the moment, particularly in delivery or in terms of even credibility. So doing a little bit deep dive there, and then pushing back on the request for price reduction if we don't believe that it's substantial, if we think that it's just posturing.
Okay, great. And it's a follow-up question to the first one. And I really like this question. What is the best language line we can use to say that I'm firm on my price without sounding disrespectful?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that varies from relationship to relationship. But often we will say, we feel that the position that we hold at the moment, that the pricing that we hold at the moment is the one that has the capacity to finalize this transaction. So we try to soften it. And they don't train you to say a set line. They train you to just adjust to the situation at hand. But I tend to use softer language. I never say that's my final price. There's no room to maneuver. I just say, this is where we are in order to facilitate this transaction. And it's something, depending on the relationship that you have, which you need to develop. And every circumstance is different. But again, the softer, more structural language is really helpful. Or often what I'll say to people is they'll say, oh, I that's not going to work. I got to move. And I say, what other issues can we discuss? Like, I move them off the price thing. let's talk about other issues. How much is it how much training do you actually require? Why is it that you're looking into this market? What is it else we can bring value to? I mean, I have added lots of value to a company by just bringing them a contact, because a good friend of mine runs Aldo Shoes. They're going through their own trouble right now, but beforehand. And I said, well, I think if we can work on this, I can get you an introduction to the buyer at Aldo. And that opened up, that just completely changed the discussion. So it's also trying to work with them on what can I do to work with you to expand your business, as opposed to lowest price, highest price.
Right. Treat it as a partnership kind of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a little
perfect.
esoteric, but yeah.
Right. Great. George, listen, we're out of time. I mean, that was fantastic. Really enjoyed the presentation. Great questions. So thank you to everyone that participated in the Q&A here. I almost hate to see this go. This was fantastic. So thanks so much for your time. So just to wrap up, thank you again, George, and really appreciate you sharing your expertise. I encourage you to join us next week for the Halifax Chambers AGM happening on April 29th virtually. You can access that on our events page. We're also hosting our Chamber Golf Challenge on June 10th at Chester Golf Club. Limited spaces left, and we have a discount for small businesses and non-for-profits. And you can also register there at halifaxchamber.com/events. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar was recorded and is going to be available on our YouTube channel shortly. Thank you for your participation in attending it today, and I hope everyone stays safe and healthy. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.